Warning, the following program contains scenes of graphic stupidity among four lifelong friends who compete to embarrass each other.
Ah, the joys of TV viewing. Nothing better than sitting down after a long day's work and watching some good old... What? Regular cable is $200 and basically dead. Okay, well, I could just use Disney Plus and watch some old episodes of my favorite animated brain rot madness Family Guy. What? The full show isn't even on one streaming platform, and you have to use $20 each just for 2 to 3 seasons? What am I even supposed to do without my beloved Family Guy?
Chocolate.
Oh, wait. It's conveniently 10:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I have Peacock. I could tune into the new episode of Saturday Night Live right now.
SNL, a series spanning generations and generations and encapsulating what makes live television so fun. Throughout the half-a-century run that the show has had, the series has seen different waves of new talent, all meant to cater to growing audiences getting interested in comedy themselves. SNL had always been a very convenient idea, at least for me. Growing up, the weird, funky gal I was able to catch on to SNL's zany and, off-the-wall humor that it had. I grew up with the Fred Armisen, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig era, so around the 2010s. And so that era tends to be, my favorite out of anything. And I just have vivid memories of going on my grandma's computer and watching sketches from that time around, probably 7 years old. And even now, I just love SNL so much, and it's one of my favorite forms of media because it really, again, just shows humor and pop culture all in one. I've even seen multiple people say it was the first, television show about television, which to me is true with the amount of references that they've made throughout the years. So many people love to debate, which generation is the funniest, as the older generations love saying that the modern day SNL isn't as funny, or they love attaching people to eras such as, Sandler 90s SNL was the funniest, or, Eddie Murphy ran 80s SNL and stuff like that. So many people throughout these different generations of people who have watched the show have gotten legendary status on their time on the show. One of these people that I've seen pretty often with this legendary status, in my opinion, does not deserve the acclaim that some people like to cling on them.
Aubrey, who is this person in SNL history in question that absolutely grinds your gears and truly irritates your entire being?
Well, tiny voice asking me questions, I'll tell you, but I will tell you with the most grudge-holding anger and disgust in the world, because the mere mention of this person ruffles my feathers and their entire existence irritates me. That person being Chevy Chase.
Absolutely disgusting, by the way. I almost puked.
Well, Aubrey, why is Chevy Chase getting you this mad? I'm sure he's not awful.
Stop asking me so many questions, and think before you speak when saying that to me. But that is the entire point of this video, and I'm going to explain why I don't like Chevy Chase and why I don't think that Chevy Chase doesn't deserve this legendary status that people like to cling on to him, and why more people in the SNL, community and people who have been on the show deserve it way more. First of all, who even is Chevy Chase? And truly, I wish I had the pleasure of not knowing. Chevy Chase is an American comedian and actor. He was in the first season of Saturday Night Live, where he was both a writer and a cast member. And he had gotten his audience based on the fact that he was the start of the segment Weekend Update, a mock newscast that the show has in the middle of the episode and has gone on since the start of the show. He had also gotten very popular for his witty, charming, and mostly misogynistic humor. Do I enjoy Weekend Update? Of course I do. I think it's such a nice way of connecting current events to funny punchlines in a familiar format such as a news broadcast. And a lot of the time, it lets members of the cast show off one-person skits, whether it's character-based or stand-up based, that lets a lot of the members of the cast show their standalone strengths. However, just because Chevy Chase was the first host of Weekend Update doesn't make him more legendary, because genuinely anyone could have done it anyways. So people clinging that aspect for a reason why Chevy Chase is so iconic is so irritating to me. Let me ask you something real quick. With all this talk that I've been spewing of how people think, Chevy Chase was so, legendary, and he was such a pioneer for Weekend Update, he was so iconic, everything like that. How long do you think he was on the show? Think about it for a second. So you might think, maybe like 7 to 8 years, like most people modern day on the show, or even in the show's run in general. What if I told you he was only there for a year as a cast member?
But Aubrey, isn't saying he got legendary within a year and then leaving more so
Proving its impact and legendary status on the show?
Oh my god, be quiet! But no, that's not my point. Usually, in being in the show for a long period of time, you're able to build characters and a progressive audience over time, and with only being on the show for a year, you're bound to become a one-hit wonder. Chevy only really had his know-it-all personality that he unfortunately carried over into real life, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But adding on to that, his so-called rise to fame and leaving the show as a cast member to get more opportunities isn't as apparent when literally the next year or two later, he was back but hosting. With him originating Weekend Update, you would think that there might have been a slight dip in quality from him hosting to the next, since, he was so witty and amazing and good, but not even was there the slightest dip in quality, but Weekend Update, in my opinion, got better. Right after Chase, Jane Curtin and later on Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray took over Weekend Update, and their bits and humor on their time as hosts were so much better in my opinion, and I find myself laughing more at their segments than clips of Chevy Chase. Weekend Update has been so dicey in its general history of hosts, as sometimes it's hard to find the right person or pair that can emulate the newscaster vibe while also having very charismatic and likable humor. However, throughout the years, there have been a number of better and funnier Weekend Update hosts who actually garner and build their audience over time through being on the show for longer. Some of my personal favorites throughout the years have been Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Colin Jost, Michael Che, Norm Macdonald, and my personal favorite, Seth Meyers. These hosts have each brought their own specific charms and bits that they've contributed to the show, with segments like Seth and Amy's Really, Joke Swap with Jost and Che, or even reoccurring Weekend Update characters such as Bobby Moynihan's Snooki impression or New York City correspondent Stefan, played by Bill Hader, both during Seth's time hosting Weekend Update. Not even just on the Weekend Update on the show, but in the general cast setting, there have been way better and more iconic cast members than him, even while he was on the show, that have outshined his performance. People such as John Belushi, Gildan Radner, Eddie Murphy, Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, David Spade, Molly Shannon, Will Ferrell, Rachel Dratch, Maya Rudolph, Fred Armisen, Will Forte, Kenan Thompson, Jason Sudeikis, Andy Samberg, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig, Bobby Moynihan, Vanessa Bayer, Kate McKinnon, Eddie Bryant, Cecily Strong, Beck Bennett, Kyle Mooney, Pete Davidson, Heidi Garner, Bowen Yang, Michael Longfellow, Ashley Bedelia. God, even everyone on season 11, who most there had only been there for 1 year and is one of the most hated seasons in the show's history, have had better moments than the best of Chevy Chase's. In order to prove my point, I wanted to ask some of the people that I know some of their opinions on legendary status SNL members.
Legendary status? Gotta go back to the OGs. So you gotta go back to Belushi, Murray, Radner. Yeah, I'd start with those three. Aykroyd. I think those are the biggest. I think those are the ones that kind of always gravitated to my brain as being kind of the most essential ones, because without them it doesn't happen. And obviously that whole first cast, Jane Curtin, everybody, they're all great, but I think those had a little bit more staying power. Belushi, Aykroyd, obviously with that first SNL style movie with the Blues Brothers.
Yes.
And then obviously Gilda Radner is just mountaintop type of a lady of SNL. She paved the way for all of them with Jane. And then, yeah, I would say Bill Murray, definitely.
You could say Chevy Chase, but
No,
That's the whole point. That's the whole point of the project. You can say Chevy Chase.
No, I said screw Chevy Chase, and I'd say it again. In a project.
Who's someone who's like legendary status for you on SNL?
Chris Farley. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, I haven't been watching SNL for that long, but I really, really, really like Marcelo Hernandez. I think he's so funny.
That's a good answer.
He's so like versatile and
Blah blah blah. Gusto not knowing the difference between cast members and hosts.
I go John Mulaney.
He's so good.
He's so funny. Oh my god.
He used to be a writer.
Are you serious?
Yeah, on SNL.
Stop. That's why he's so funny. Oh my gosh, I love John Mulaney.
The originals were really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Belushi, Aykroyd, and what are the girls' names?
Gilda Radner.
Yeah, Gilda Radner. You know, yeah, all them. They were really good. And then I also liked when, you know, the other group, like from Tommy Boy, what's his name?
Chris Farley.
Yeah, Farley. I like that group. They were super funny.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kristen Wiig's group was really good too.
As you could see from this randomly selected group of people, that none of them had mentioned Chase besides Mr. Moan's hate-filled mention. So, that should prove that Chevy Chase is liked by not many.
Okay, Aubrey, we get it. He isn't as funny, but it's not like he's a bad person, right?
Sorry about that, guys. But hopefully she'll stop chiming in now. But as you can guess, one of the other reasons I despise heavily Chevy Chase and I'm so heavily against his legendary status is because he doesn't exude any sort of well-wishing virtues that should come from a legend. Am I asking for these comedians in an industry that is already so hard to land an audience from and even financially gain from to donate all their life savings to different charities in order to prove they're good people? No, but it would be a nice bonus. However, Chevy Chase has shown throughout his career that he is not a good person and comes as a warning of what heightened egos and privilege do to a person in the entertainment industry. I feel like it's hard to know where to start in terms of Chevy Chase's controversies, especially since, there's been so many and in different categories of offensiveness. So I'm just going to start, from the very first one I've seen, which is actually a sketch from his one and only year of being a cast member on the show, the Richard Pryor interview sketch. In the sketch, it's Chase interviewing Pryor for a janitorial job, but he leads the conversation to racially motivated language until saying the N-word on live television in front of both a black man and a live audience. There could have been multiple excuses people could have thrown for this, like, oh, it was a different time, or, it could have been a fault of the writers, who one may have been credited to be Paul Mooney, another black man, but another one might have been credited to being Chevy himself. And in the sketch itself, Pryor uses derogatory terms for white people, which, frankly, I didn't know existed. Also was another cast member on the show at the time, Garrett Morris, who was the first black cast member on the show, and has since then called out the show's early day racism within the cast, primarily with Chase, and in the writer's room. It's good how the show has been able to get out of this type of humor, not even in, a times are changing, way, but, is this, funny? Is this actually funny for people? Again, I guess it's just me being, having, different humor than people back then, but, again, the punchline was, janitor job and racial minority equals funny, and sure, people could have doubled back and said, well, the fact that Pryor, bounces back with the terms on his end, but it's a white guy. I don't care if someone calls a white guy a honky. I didn't even know that was a thing. So like these are just stereotypes that don't have any sort of merit. And so Chase doesn't do anything for me in this sketch, and I don't know how this again was seen as funny. And while the show itself has changed in its humor, Chase certainly hasn't. When Chase was on the show Community, he used the N-word again on an on-set meltdown in 2012, a whole 37 years after that initial sketch aired. He was also known for being an extremely toxic presence on that set as well, making racist and harmful remarks to co-stars Yvette Nicole Brown and Donald Glover, better known by his music handle Childish Gambino, and is leagues more successful than Chase now. And Joel McHale later recounted the on-set tension caused from Chevy's time on the show and Chase's threats to physically fight him and, actual altercations that have happened to where Chase got his, shoulder sprained from Joel McHale because it's Joel McHale versus old Chevy Chase. Like, what are you expecting? Back to the SNL days, but he was also known to be very misogynistic towards the other women on the show, but that was also just a normalized thing on set at the time with most of the male cast, unfortunately, because men just really hate when women are funnier than them, I guess. But not even just talking about his misogyny, but he was also just plain rude. Most of the people who have worked with him have found him to be extremely arrogant and unpleasant to work with, to where it's been widely known for people over the past few years of him in the spotlight. It's been especially prominent with him hosting the show, where now he has the reputation of being one of the worst hosts in the show's history. On Chase's first hosting stint on the show, he came back guns a-blazing to the SNL atmosphere and thinking he was better than everyone else. He had his notorious altercation with Bill Murray, who was a new cast member by the time that this had happened on the show. Basically, Chase started insulting Murray's facial scars, and obviously, this being an uncontrollable thing for Murray, caused Murray to fire back with comments on Chevy. So, 5 minutes before the show started to air, the two got into a physical fight, causing disheveled Chase to go on air and would result in Murray and Chase becoming friends? Oh, okay. Past that incident would come his time hosting in 1985 during season 11, which I had already previously mentioned. In season 11, we saw the arrival of new cast member Terry Sweeney, the first openly gay cast member in the show's history. Truly, his existence on the show and Chase's hosting wouldn't have resulted in... what? Oh my god! Yeah, he tried doing a sketch where Terry Sweeney had AIDS. During the AIDS epidemic. Oh my god, I can't with this man every time. Terry Sweeney, while being put in a generally negative output of a season, paved the way for many queer comedians to being open about their sexuality, as well as many being included on the show as writers or even on the cast. If this sketch were to go through during a period where people were scared to even touch a queer person in fear of getting AIDS, this probably would have sent back the queer community being represented in media by, like a million years, I'm guessing. I don't know. People really did not like gay people back then. However, Chase's most infamous time on the show was his final time hosting in 1997. During that week, he generally had irrational and abusive behavior towards anyone there that week, especially towards the woman who he had asked female writers to give him blowjobs, and unfortunately, an incident where he had slapped cast member Sherry O'Terry in the back of the head. The reason why this was his last time hosting the show was because after the incident with O'Terry, he was banned from the show.
Yes! I'm so happy! Ah! I'm so happy!
Even after Chase's hosting ban, he continued to make cameos on the show, and again, it's like he peaked on SNL. But when Chase asked Lorne later if his ban could be repealed, Lorne basically said, no, suck it up. And Chase hasn't had a speaking cameo on the show since 2015. He later on said how he wishes he was given back his ability to host on the show, but given his irreversible stain of a reputation, I would say that's out of the question now. So, hopefully, with all of this, you can see why I don't like Chevy Chase and why I believe he should not be considered a legendary SNL cast member. Well, that's all I need to say. I'm gonna end this by saying, I'm Aubrey Brocious, and you're not. Yes, I'm stealing Chevy Chase's catchphrase because he doesn't deserve one.